Before we jump into this video, I would like to thank and acknowledge and give credit to at Redbeard Ops, Tony Severio Knives, at Walter Searles Blades, and at Alley Knives. Without these guys, this first knife would not have been possible. What you're looking at on screen is the stock removal stage, and I'll show you the first mistakes I made in this. And essentially what I did here was I let the hand, I had a 4-inch angle grinder handheld, and I let the angle grinder get away from me, and it caused these scratch marks in the blade that were hard to get out. So be careful. Don't make these mistakes that I made. The key is to stay back from the stock. If you haven't used an angle grinder, practice a little bit before. You'll quickly get the hang of it. And I'll also show you this. This is an odd mistake. This is where I had the angle grinder at an angle that caused it to bite into or scratch the spine of the knife. I wasn't paying attention to the spine, and that's what I got. That was, I actually didn't get that out. I just moved forward with a knife build. In order to accomplish my first knife, I kind of just let that go. Hadn't made that mistake since, but that's something to be aware of. Again, with the angle grinder, if you're not familiar, it's an easy tool to use. If you're like me, first time user, you may want to practice with it some, but that is right out of the gate the first mistake that I made. Alright, next in the steps of knife making is the filing or grinding of the blade itself. I made a lot of mistakes on this one. The first one is the grind line at the top. If I go in here and I zoom in, maybe not that much, you can see this arc or arch that comes down from the top of the spine of the knife. That is opposite of the way it should be. So what I should have done is I should have scribed from the bottom here and had that be my scribe line for the blade. Basically, I have the opposite of what I should have had. So that didn't, mess me up too much, but it's something to be aware of. Always scribe from the bottom. You probably won't make that mistake, but I did. The next thing was the plunge lines. These plunge lines are cut in with a chainsaw file, and I highly recommend going and checking out the Redbeard Ops first time knife makers video. I'll link it in the description. It's what I used step by step to make this knife, and he recommends stopping the plunge lines short about 1/8 of an inch to 1/16 of an inch from your guide for your bevels, which we talked about earlier. So in this case, I should have stopped my plunge lines at least 1/8 of an inch on the first try, because you can blend these in later when you're hand filing. I'll also link in the description. I'll link to the filing jig that I used. Link to that video as well. So those are two big ones that I made. Believe it or not, the plunge line thing was a huge mistake. I'll show you some pictures in a minute to where I wasn't able to get the plunge line out. It went up too far. And I've since learned how to fix all that, but at the time, my first knife, I just let it go, and I'll show you what that looks like here. So this is after I have filed the knife by hand. This is straight out of the filing process, or straight from the filing process, and you can obviously see my plunge line is gouged here. I'll show you a picture of the final hand sanding in a moment, and you'll see what I was able to accomplish just by hand sanding a lot. So after we have done the hand filing on our jig, we are ready to go into hand sanding. Didn't make a lot of mistakes with this one, but I will show you the result of that plunge line being too deep, too high to the bevel. And so this is the opposite side of the knife. So you can see here that it turned out okay. Still too high, right in here. but this is sanded to 220 grit. I went on ahead and sanded it up to, I think it's 800, which I'll show you in just a second. But this is the opposite side of the knife where I didn't make that huge plunge line mistake. I made a mistake here, still too high. I should have stopped it right around here. That's where it should have cut off at. And it went up to here, about 1/8 of an inch, like we were talking about. So here is the side where I made the mistake after taking it up to 800 grit, I think it was. It may have been 600 or 800 on the final knife, but you can see that plunge line is ugly. But I went ahead, the knife is very usable, holds an edge great. It's a great working knife. I beat it up and, just use it for everyday carry. So that is the result of the mistake from the plunge line on the hand filing. All right, so we've done our hand sanding up to 600 grit. We've put it in for heat treatment and tempering, and we have the scales cut to rough size, and we're ready. So this is a picture of how I glued up my fourth knife using these spring clamps. Got some wax paper down here. Everything looks kind of organized. And then this was my first knife attempt, and this is hilarious. I don't know what I was thinking. I've got 3 clamps of different kinds on here, probably too tight. For some reason decided it would be a great idea to coat this in tin foil, which was a huge mistake because the tin foil embedded into the epoxy, and I had to grind it out in some places. So I'm sure you won't do something like this, but rather do something like this. And the mistakes I made starting from the top down, so I used a 10-minute epoxy, which was a huge mistake. I should have used 30, which I've now gone to. 30 minutes of working time with a 2-part epoxy is a whole lot less stressful than a 10-minute epoxy on your first knife. So I highly recommend the 30-minute epoxy. And we'll put links in the description to that epoxy and where I got it. I've gotten away from these screw clamps. Really, you can easily over tighten the scales in this process of gluing up, and it just basically squishes or squashes out all your epoxy and leaving very little. I haven't had any problems with these scales yet. These are G10 scales. I forgot to mention that. Everything I've been using is G10, and it's easy to work with. It's forgiving. It doesn't burn easy, and it's just real stable as well. So for God's sakes, don't do this. Do something that looks like this. So we've come out of glue up, got rid of our tin foil, and we have the basic scales. I have honed these or shaped these to a rough size. As you can see, the scales are not flush with the tang of the knife. And a lot of different mistakes I made here. One that I knew better, and I guess I just forgot, is when you're shaping these scales, the first thing you want to do is have the outside of the scales completely final flush trimmed or shaped to the tang of the knife. The reason for that is if you notice these pencil lines that I have drawn on here, that's where I'm going to start my beveling, shaping the bevels on the handles on the scales. And that's putting the cart way before the horse, because if you notice, let me zoom in on that. The scales are still in rough form. I still have glue down in here that's showing, and I needed to have made these scales flush with the tang. Finish flush, I mean, get them the way you want them.